con nosotros la gente de...
People from both the private sector and the public sector here in the meeting, and some other people that will be attending via YouTube. And so thank you very much. I will introduce you to the public in Spanish, okay? Doña Heather Crondahl es arquitecta de software, arquitecta de tecnología, y ha trabajado con el estado de Alaska por varios años y ha promovido la modernización de sus sistemas, la apertura y la integración de sistemas. Y detrás de los estándares del Object Management Group, que son los que están detrás de UML, Corba y otras cosas, y con quienes el club tiene una relación muy productiva desde hace más de 25 años, gracias a Roberto y a Richard Soley. OMG o OMG desarrolla estándares con base en experiencia. No salen de la nada, ¿verdad? Como un sueño de opio de alguien, sino que se basa en la experiencia, y Heather es líder de ese grupo. Se basa en la experiencia que ellos han tenido desarrollando marcos para sistemas públicos o sistemas cívicos o civiles. Bueno, cívico, civil y demás viene de ciudad, ¿verdad? De civitas. Entonces, en el cual pueden participar, distintos actores, no solamente el Estado o las empresas públicas, sino también organizaciones civiles, comunales, etc. La idea de esto es que da un marco de arquitectura para lograr estas cosas, y hay una experiencia muy rica que Heather nos va a compartir hoy. So welcome, Heather. Thank you very much for coming and sharing with us. And you're now the chief of the public.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I just want to say I am a little bit jealous of all of you in Costa Rica. I'm here in Alaska, and this is our cold season that we're just going into, cold and dark. So I'm a little envious that you have such beautiful weather down there. So I'll get started. My name is Heather Crondahl, and I am the co-CEO and chief architect at the Open Civic Foundation. I am the author of the Open Civic Architectural Framework, which is what we're here to talk about today. I'll give you a little bit of background on the Open Civic Architectural Framework. It started, or it was conceptualized when I was the technology architect for the Office of Management and Budget for the state of Alaska. We're in a sort of a budget crisis, I would say, in the state of Alaska. When the prices of oil dropped, we experienced a real lack of ability to be able to fund our services. One of the things that I was doing at the time was really looking at our information technology capital budget requests when they came through. And I was looking for ways that we could improve our systems, where we could reduce the cost of service delivery, and really improve services, improve public participation, participatory governance, be able to also find ways to improve our economy in the state of Alaska. And what I found when I was analyzing the information system requests that were coming in was that there was a lot of duplication in our information systems in the state of Alaska. And as I started networking and talking with others across other states and talking with chief officers or chief data officers network, I found that that this was a problem, not just in the state of Alaska and not just for state government. This is a problem across the board, whether we're talking about federal, state, local, tribal, or territorial government. And it's an international issue as well. And so I started, conceptualizing how can we change the problems that we have, around technology bloat, around our information systems costing so much to to maintain and, to be able to modernize our information systems and really go past modernization into systems transformation. And what I found was that when we're talking about large scale information systems, and these are things like statewide longitudinal data systems that are connecting education data with labor data, or health information exchanges, which are connecting not only health information from across state or local government or federal government, but they're also trying to connect health information from healthcare providers, insurances that are very expensive to create, to make interoperable, and those are the ones that I really focused in on. And so the way that I did that was taking a look at the parts of the information systems that are duplicative, and I've skipped a couple of slides here. Sorry about that. This is the conceptualization of OCAF, and now we're going to go on to some of the issues that that the Open Civic Architectural Framework really addresses. And within that, we have issues such as proprietary system lock-in. We have procurement and contract management failure, duplicative infrastructure and systems integration failure, non-comprehensive cybersecurity, unstandardized and siloed data, loss of data rights and loss of privacy. We have unclear strategy resulting in unfocused and ineffective governance. We have technology bloat and increased IT management costs. We have minimal opportunity for civic engagement, antiquated civic service delivery methods, and we have maintenance versus modernization disruptions. And again, these are things that are happening across the board. This is federal, state, local, tribal, territorial government, international, and national. And so to solve these issues, what we really needed was more of a view on our information systems as a platform. And what that would allow us to do is really break down our information systems into components. And when we're talking about really breaking down our systems into components in that way, we also have to look at what is the benefit of that. And we can look at that in the same sort of way that we look at supply chain management. And so if we are really trying to improve our supply chain when it comes to our information systems, and that's really the point here, is that if we look at the data as the asset within our information systems, and we look at how that data is moving between organizations, between government organizations and public organizations, we see that we do have, a supply chain management issue. And it starts with the raw materials. And raw materials can be standardized data and digital assets. So again, we're coming back to how do we break down those information systems and how do we turn them into commodity components? Because we're really starting to talk about supply chain management and commodities now. And if we look at our information systems in that way, that means that we're going to get rid of that proprietary lock-in by breaking those pieces out and looking at them as more along the lines of microservices. And so if we are to do that, that means that we're kind of moving through that supply chain and we're improving our ability to move our data and open up these microservices, these components within the supply chain to be used for manufacturing of new services and to change up distribution methods or models. So if we're looking at our business model and we offer these platform services, what we're doing is we're enabling civic entrepreneurs or enabling businesses outside of government to be able to step in and provide services and do a better job a lot of the time than government often does. We have a really good example of this in the state of Alaska, where we have the Department of Motor Vehicles has pilot offices throughout the state. And what they currently do is they allow these businesses to connect into their information system directly so that they can provide the services. But what they don't do is they don't allow the supply chain or they don't allow the distribution channels to change. So it means you still have to go into a local office to renew your driver's license or to, to register your vehicle or boat or whatever it may be. And so what we're talking about when we're talking about platform development is changing that so that individuals, so that civic entrepreneurs, businesses can then reach into our application programming interface layer for our platform and with the proper permissions be able to securely and privately access the data and access the microservices so that they can start building out civic services for constituents. And what this would allow us to do is change the distribution method. And so imagine if we were to open up this platform to individuals who would like to start creating businesses around government data. And if I was to do this in the model of, a DMV, maybe I would just like return on my investment by contacting the API, retrieving all of the names and email addresses and text messages and text or phone numbers for those individuals whose driver's license is going to expire in the next month. And then I'm going to send out a message, a text message or an email to all of those individuals, and I'm going to give them a few options to renew right then and there. And because I'm a competitive business, I'm offering, you can pay with Apple Pay or credit card, and within, maybe 3 or 4 interactions on your cell phone, somebody has renewed their driver's license. And that value proposition is really powerful to constituents because they're getting better service than what they would originally get with the government services. So that's how we kind of change that distribution method, and we allow civic entrepreneurs to step in where they feel passionate and start providing civic services to constituents as well. Roberto, did you have a question?
Yeah. This view of the supply chain management is great with public data. How and where would the data protection be enforced? Whose responsibility is it? So
the data protection is actually the part of the architecture itself. So within the architecture, we have multiple different layers. We've got the business, data, applications, technology, and security layers. So there are 5 layers that come together. Within those layers, we can think about them in terms of there are standards within each of those layers. And if we're looking at the security layer, what we want to really focus in on are things that are going to help us become secure, but we also need to be compliant with government. So here in the United States, we have Fisma Compliance, which is Federal Information System Management Act compliance. And within that, we've got the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And so what they do is they create standards for us that say, okay, if you're going to be Fisma compliant, these are some of the things that you need to do in your information systems. And 2 of those things that we need to do are configuration management and data classification. The OCAF framework goes beyond that, and it creates what you know, when I talk about it, I generalize, and it's almost like this armored car with these smart contracts. And what it allows us to do is it allows government entities to be able to set the business rules and processes around their data. It allows us to create profiles that say, okay, if I am an organization and I'd like to use health and social services data, I need to go through this proper contract process where I contact health and social services. I provide the information to them through the OCAF system, and then they give me the permission to access certain levels of data. And because we're classifying our data and we're using configuration management, then that means that I'm able to say exactly which applications are using my data and which data that they get to use. So it's set by the owner of the data, and that trickles down to the individual as well, which is a beautiful thing, because right now we just don't have the regulations that we need in place to protect our constituents and protect their data rights as well. So this allows constituents to start also you know, managing their own profiles to be able to set those and create those smart contracts for themselves as well. So think of it kind of like an armored car, and all of the knowledge that you need is within that kind of armored data packet as it goes out and traverses this data pipeline, the semantic data pipeline that we're talking about. And so we really focus in on the ability to not just secure the data, but also data privacy as well. So those are two very important aspects. And I just wanted to say here, if someone does have a question, just hold up your hand, and I'm happy to answer that question as we move forward. So just going back here, this is very much like the supply chain. What we want to do is we want to start creating those modular pieces of the information system, those components. And then we're not only just opening data, but we're also opening up those microservices to constituents to be able to build off of. And so those become components within this ecosystem as well. And so that's very powerful, because what that does is that creates economic development. So if we are, and I'm just going to switch slides here for a second. If we're looking at decomposing really an information system, a monolith, into these microservice pieces, one of the things that, or one of the aspects of that would be, and this is a really good example of breaking it down into microservices, is business process management, and business rules, and case management. So these are certain things that we do within just about every information system. So OCAF, what it does is it creates abstractions, and it allows us to create these microservices based on the abstractions. The abstractions are things like business process management, and that allow us to then use standards. And we apply many of the standards through the object management group to this reference architecture that builds out the ecosystem. One of the ways that I kind of like to describe this is that the way that we manage our data right now, think of it in terms of an interstate highway system, so for transportation. And imagine that, especially in our country, what it would be like for supply chain management if we had never built that interstate system. We wouldn't really be able to effectively move commodities across the country. So whether it's timber or steel, what we would have to do is a producer would actually have to build out a road system to reach the manufacturer. So now think about the way that we move our data around, between information systems. That's exactly what we're doing, and it's incredibly inefficient, and it costs a lot of money, and there's a very high failure rate. So each time I want to, as an organization, make my data interoperable, I have to build that interoperability with another organization. And imagine how ineffective that would be and what our road system would look like if we took that virtual picture and we actually physically saw that in road systems across our countries. So we break these pieces down, through abstraction, and then what we do is we create microservices based on each one of those abstractions. Now, that's not completely effective in itself, because what you need to do is you need to be able to develop a standardized API layer over the top of those microservices. When you do that, that creates the power to be able to start distributing out those microservices in a way that individuals can build the application layer on top of it. Did we have a question?
Tengo una charla. ¿Qué? Abre el principio.
No, just background conversation.
Sorry about that. Sorry about
that.
So it's really the standardized API layer across the top of the microservices that makes this highly effective. And so what happens when it's standardized and it's not proprietary is that it is open to anyone. So if I want to start a business and I want to be an API distributor, then what I do is I open up and I start mapping the API to, or we have microservice providers that map their microservices to the API. So this changes as well the way that we're developing our information systems in addition, because in the way that we're acting together throughout this business model. So all of the players within the business model are kind of changing up the way that we do things. So right now, what we do, if we have an information system that we want developed, we put out a request for proposal. We get responses back, and those responses are really the best business model for that vendor. It's not the best business model for government. Even if they are using microservice development, they're not using it in a way where government benefits from it. They're using microservice development, and then they're providing that software system to us as a monolith, because government can't reach in and trade out that microservice. And that's the power of the microservice development, because we want to be able to trade them out. And so what this system does is it says, we're going to standardize this application layer. Then instead of paying the vendors to create the interoperability to map their microservices, they want to map their microservices to the standardized API layer because it's a recurring source of revenue. So every single time an application pings the API layer, we load balance over the top of the of all of these virtual domains for each one of the microservices, and then that call is processed by one of these microservices. The microservices are all black boxes. And I mean by that is that they are proprietary. And this is the way that that vendors who have proprietary technology participate in this ecosystem. And it's very beneficial to them to participate in this way, because they do get this recurring source of revenue simply just by mapping microservices that they currently already have to the standardized API layer. And so imagine, how this opens up opportunity for business. Now, if I am someone who was interested in, being a government service provider, IT government service provider, and I have this opportunity where I'm given this standard that I can build to, I can contact just about any API provider, and I can say, listen, I'd like to be a provider now. They become certified against the standard, and now they're in business. And they're receiving this reoccurring source of revenue as well as applications start to interact with their microservice. So go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. Did I understand correctly? So every time an application uses a microservice, somebody gets paid something.
Yes. Yes. So if we're talking about being a microservice provider, then that's really powerful for those businesses, because they know that they're going to have business. They don't have that lag time now when they're coming into the ecosystem, where they have to go out and market themselves. They have to try to find the business. The business is already there. And it's the same for the API providers, because they know if they set up an API, then there are already government organizations, civic entrepreneurs that are out there that are using the system that creates the interoperability, that opens up the data for them, that provides the business processes and rules for them to be compliant, and allows them to concentrate on just building their application layer, or just building out their application, and not having to deal with all the infrastructure costs. Can you imagine, as a government agency, the cost savings if each time you were building an information system, you didn't have to think about setting up the infrastructure or systems integration? All you had to do was concentrate, because you knew you had this infrastructure in place already that allowed you to tie in and start just developing your applications. So it's very powerful in that way.
So who owns the infrastructure? Sorry, Heather.
So the infrastructure is it's an open ecosystem.
It's owned by many people.
It's owned by many people. Yes, exactly. And, one of the other beautiful aspects about this as well is that depending on, which country that, establishes this infrastructure and what your rules are for incorporation. Here in the United States, we have foundations. And so the Open Civic Foundation was designed so that it takes some of that revenue that's brought in from the interactions in this ecosystem. And then what it does is it puts that back out into the public for grants. So what we've done here is we're changing the way, instead of putting so much money into our current information systems, which I talk about as being as a kind of technology bloat. And here in the United States, it's taking away from our ability to maintain our legacy systems and to be able to really kind of modernize our systems and have more sustainable civic service delivery. So we're actually, because of the cost of our information systems, we're taking money away from civic service delivery instead of technology improving civic service delivery. So it's having this negative, we have this negative effect right now. Where we intend to, through the Open Civic Foundation, to change that. And we want technology, again, to work for civic outcomes instead of technology taking away from civic outcomes. And so each time that, within this ecosystem, that there's an interaction, there's this small interaction tax. And a part of that can go back to a foundation or an organization that's set up within a community. They can be community centric, they can be regional, they can be kind of large scale organizations. But what it does is it helps redistribute that money back out into the economy and improve civic outcomes. So one of the civic outcomes that I like to talk about here in the United States, we have inner city food deserts, and they're created because of crime within the inner cities. And so grocery stores and other stores to purchase healthy food are not available within some of these areas because of the high crime rate. So people are purchasing their food from fast food restaurants and from local stores that sell alcohol and maybe cigarettes, and they might sell white bread and chocolate bars. And so the rate of diabetes is very, very high, and chronic illness is very high in these areas because of these food deserts. So what we would do is we would open up a grant program, and then local communities can apply for those grants, and then we'll work with them to, through using social marketing and other techniques, enterprise architecture as well, to set up a program so that they can then improve civic outcomes in that area. And while they're doing that, they're using the data from this this ecosystem, and they're building their applications that support their program on this ecosystem. So it feeds back in, each time that application is used, it creates another sort of small interaction tax, and it continues to feed the system. So it's very much an ecosystem in that it's not owned by anyone specifically, and it's set up in a way so it is sustainable and self-maintainable. And because we're using standards in the development of each one of the components or the microservices, through that standards organization, through the object management group, what we're doing is we're creating our ability to then take input from the businesses who are participating in the ecosystem, and then manage change of the specifications or the standards through the object management group. And this can also happen through other standards organizations as well, because there's the standards that we're using to build out the components or the microservices in the API layer are not specific just to the object management group. They're open standards that are available to us that fit very well with the abstraction that we used for the Open Civic Architectural Framework. So I'm going to stop here and maybe take some more questions from the audience.
I have one, if I may.
Mhm.
I was thinking, all right, so this is somewhat, the concept is simple, but building it up can have its complexity, and it does have its complexities. So which would you say are the fundamentals, that like the supporting fundamental pieces that will allow you to build this type of ecosystem?
So the most important parts are the security architecture within the system, and then also the technology architecture. And that's because you have to have the pieces in place to be able to read and write data from these virtual domains. And so API gateways are very important in setting those up, and then having your quality services that create that security built in as part of that right up front. And then what you can do after you have that, that's kind of the framework, the straw horse that starts everything off. And then after that, you can continue to add these abstractions or these microservices like business process management and case management, and do it strategically and phase it in so that you're continuing to add these microservices, but you have an operable product as you're doing it.
Okay, and that common framework, that would not, I suppose, be funded by specific private groups or individuals, but there's got to be some amount of public funding that would set all that basic infrastructure up so that we can start building upon it, right?
Well, actually, the way that we're going to be approaching that through this project is that we're starting. It doesn't have public funding. We're starting with those individuals who are working on the standards, and those businesses, academic institutions are coming together, and the vendors are going to be mapping their microservices to the standard API layer that's being created by the standards organizations. So within the object, right now we're working within the object management group because that's the standards organization that we chose to work with. And within that, let's say, for instance, data distribution service is one of the architectures that we reference through the OCAF reference architecture. And so within the data distribution service, we have a multitude of vendors out there and organizations that are working on maintaining the standard change management, and also are providing services according to that data distribution service. So what they're going to do is they're going to take their existing microservices, map them to our standardized API layer to enable that standard in the ecosystem. So this is something that very much can be set up by a group of very determined people working in the standards arena.
Right.
It's not something where you would have to go out and you would have to get funding to be able to do this. It is nice to have government organizations participate, because then you have that government data that's available, and that's an asset that's very important, that we kind of open those assets up to allow them to be used. When they're monopolized, that means that the cost of government goes up because government is the only one who can provide the service. If the commodity is not openly available, it causes the cost to kind of skyrocket on service delivery. What this does is this opens the data up safely according to government regulations, and it enables those assets to be able to be used in business. So we're going to see not only economic development from these microservices and from opening up the data, but we're also going to see economic development from additional civic services that are built out. So if I'm a civic entrepreneur, I can say, I really feel passionate about this one thing. I'm going to create a business to do this. And now I have this ecosystem to build it on.
Right. I like to ask a second question, then allow others to ask theirs.
Sure.
In your experience, what were practical impediments or issues, points of friction that maybe we're trying to slow down or even stop this type of development? Meaning, if you change the rules of the game, some people are going to lose opportunities for this technology blow up and increased or totally expanded, artificially expanded revenue, if you will, which is natural in a competitive environment. So there will be winners and losers, right? There will be groups that will lose the opportunity of charging larger sums for something that will now be set at a more rational cost or price. In your experience, maybe from the political perspective, which were main challenges, or maybe not so much challenges, but ways of avoiding those roadblocks or difficulties in implementing or changing the rules?
Sorry, I swallowed down the wrong tube. My goodness. I think that what we're seeing right now, sorry, is that there is going to be a learning curve here. And I think that what we have to do is we have to demonstrate the viability of this ecosystem. And then in doing that, I think we're going to start seeing more players. We have a couple of different things that are happening within the United States right now. One of those is we have a big push for smart city initiatives. Within those smart city initiatives, we're seeing collaborations, smart cities that are collaborating together, and they're pooling their money so that they can bring in and plan for, how they're going to roll out their technology stacks. What is happening there is that it creates, it's done with the best intentions, but it's the participants that are within those collaborations that are going to be benefiting from that proprietary lock-in now. So it's not a true open ecosystem. it's closed, and it's closing. What it's causing is it's causing closed doors in the market. So if you are, let's say that you're part of one of these, you know, cooperative organizations, then, you know, in your business X, Y, or Z, then you're the one that you're going to be providing the service. The only way for somebody to get in now and you know, participate in that is that they're going to have to pay to be part of that collaboration. So that increases the cost of being able to provide services to smart cities or to government. And so that's a direction that we're seeing happen right now. This sort of ecosystem opens the doors to new business, and it eases entry into certain technology businesses, and it doesn't close doors like that. And so I really love that model because it just opens things up. I think what we're going to see though is that, there's been a good amount of enthusiasm from some of the larger, you know, technology companies, because they see that this is the recurring source of revenue is very appealing. It reduces their cost of research and development because that's being done openly in the market. It also reduces the need for them to go out and market themselves to government entities and go through the government procurement process, because they're being fed by this recurring source of revenue. So it's actually cutting down the cost of doing business for them in the government market or in the civic arena. And what it'll do as they start adding microservices in data centers across the country, and we're load balancing across that, it's going to increase their profits even more. But it doesn't eliminate you as the small business or a newcomer to this ecosystem from participating. You still have that open door, and you can participate in the same way that any other organization can, because we've removed the differentiation of the product.
Right.
We've standardized it.
So maybe a key political move would be to highlight the advantages for the big guys to come into this type of deal. And emphasize those as what they would win for getting into it, right?
Certainly, yes, yes. And I think in addition to that too, when we look at, you know, large scale social marketing campaigns, and I don't mean social media marketing, but behavior change, this is something that, and we're focused on that as well as, you know, not just putting together our kind of straw horse and the infrastructure, but also looking at the behavior change that is going to have to happen to really create adoption and readiness for large scale systems transformations that can take place, you know, on this type of ecosystem. And a lot of that has to do with the business side within government, understanding how important something like this is to them being able to provide better services to their constituents, and to understand how it works and have a better in-depth understanding of that and the benefit to them. So the social marketing aspect, I think, is going to be fairly important as well.
Nacho has his hand raised. Nacho?
Yes, thank you very much. One thing that interests some people here in Costa Rica is open data.
Yep.
How does your openness, or how is that built into your framework or your frame of mind of this initiative?
It is very much so. So within, we have those 5 architectures. So we've got the business, data, applications, technology, and security. Within the data architecture, we really focus in on that semantic layer. And so when one of the big problems that we have with open data is that it's not standardized and it's not readily available. So when we're creating interoperability between systems at the state level, and this is something that is a constant need, it's very expensive to do because we're doing it in an ad hoc way. What this does from a really high level is it allows you through the APIs to connect your data into the ecosystem and map it to ontologies. and ontologies can be inherited from. So imagine if you want to create interoperability maybe with database A, with maybe 4 or 5 different information systems, and they might have a different ontology or common vocabulary that they use to be able to make that data interoperable. So by mapping your data from database A through this API to this ontology, you'll be able to understand, or we'll be able to use machine learning algorithms then to aid in that standardization, because we know what the relationship between the entities are, what the properties are, what the constraints on those properties are, so that we can better help standardize that data, and we can actually help standardize that data to many different common vocabularies or ontologies, depending on how deep that you actually wanted to go. If it was just a common vocabulary, you'd have you know, it would be limited what you could actually, you know, do with the data then, because it I think one of the beautiful things about this as well is that it provides context to our data. So if you can imagine that you have now standardized your data and you're creating almost this this master data management system, this virtual master data management system using these virtual domains. And imagine if you want to understand better what the correlations are between various data sets, you could, you know, your application could just traverse these data sets, and it's very powerful when it comes to machine learning and artificial intelligence, because now we have this pipeline of data with these built-in rules of how the data can be used, and we've also given the data context. So we definitely focus in on through the data architecture on that semantic layer, and the ability to standardize data in that way.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Oh.
I have 2 more. Sorry.
Good.
Mute my mic. Sorry, I don't want to monopolize this, but is accountability one of the things that moves these initiatives?
It is in a couple of different ways. We definitely need to be, when it comes to data privacy, you know, this system allows us to take on the accountability of the privacy of our own data. So that means that as an individual, I get to state how my data is used through these smart contracts. And as an organization who is bringing data into the system, I also get to state how my data is used. And I get to set profiles as to, you know, what classifications of data are used for which uses. I think there's also a level of accountability here as well, where we are looking at more of a equitable distribution of data, I want to say. So I think one of the issues that we're going to face as you know, government organizations starting to open up our data is that if we don't have a system in place that creates equitable distribution, then certain individuals, certain businesses, certain organizations will naturally, the way that things are structured now, be able to have access to that data, and others will not. And so I think as you know, as a society, that's one of the things that we need to look at, is that equitable distribution of data, and we need to be accountable for that, because everyone should be able to have access to those public assets. They shouldn't be monopolized in really any way. They should be used properly, and government should govern over that the way, you know, the way government is supposed to govern, by setting rules like, you know, HIPAA compliance, Federal Information System Management Act compliance, things like that. But the data should still be open and available for use within the economy.
But it seems part of the trick is automating those controls as they are applied to data, right? By means of digital contracts and defining how each data item can be used, correct?
Yes. So within those digital contracts, and that's enforced through the quality management system of the API gateways. So those are very important aspects of this. And I think in addition to, when we're talking about artificial intelligence and the way artificial intelligence, is created, that we have to ensure that that we're going about developing systems like this in a very ethical way. They're in addition to being accountable, that's one of the areas of accountability is that we're providing true context to our data, so that we're eliminating bias, we're eliminating issues like that.
¿Tú tenías otra pregunta?
Any more questions? I have one. Yes, I've seen since I read the brief of your talk today, and one of your slides, it's somewhere in this value delivery model language.
Yes.
How does that work?
Okay, so really what we're talking about, the basis of OCAP is the business app, or the business architecture is based on business modeling. And in that business model, we have partners and we have assets. And so if we want to open up resources, data resources, or the resources of the components of our information systems, and I call them commodity components, we have to do that within a business model. We have to be able to understand how that information can be used, that data can be used. And the VDML is a standard that allows us to then encode a business modeling system into this system and associate it with the data asset. So if in business rules and processes in addition. So if let's say that I'm a player in this ecosystem and I want to create a business based off health and social services data, well, I'm a partner in that. And now I'm a partner with health and social services, right? Because it's their data rules that I have to follow. So what I want to do is I want to instantiate this code base based on the fact that I'm instantiating a certain business model. And with that business model, I get access to the data and the rules and everything that I need to be able to use that data in my application layer. And so we do that through VDML. So it's a really exciting way to be able to use architecture as code and enable architecture, the government's use of architecture in a way that makes sense to the business community, because they just want to know how to utilize this data, how to utilize the API layer so that they can build out their business. And one of the most challenging things that we do right now in the United States, and I deal with this at the state level, is that when an organization wants to access state data, they have to put in a request. And the cost of opening up that data is then passed on to that business, but it just happens once. So now if I want to develop an application based on health and social services data, then all of the work to make their data interoperable and open that up to me and develop that that memorandum of agreement that tells me how I can use their data, all of that happens just once. This system allows it to be open to anybody so that you can build those smart contracts and those business models and have access to the data. And it's not a one-off every time it's done with this great expense. It just allows you to do it by instantiating that API code base.
Thank you.
Heather, talking about the public institution procurement of technology. I mean,
Mhm.
nowadays, when they want to replace an old system, they go out and buy another monolithic thing, right?
Yes.
And it's a big process, it's a big tender, and it takes forever, and it's huge, high risk.
Yes.
How do you see this ecosystem replacing that?
So within this ecosystem, what happens is that organizations can really just concentrate on developing the application layer because the infrastructure already exists. So what you're doing is you're in fact working closer with the business side, and you're enabling them through these abstractions, like abstracting out business rules, abstracting out business processes, and having that be a microservice within the platform. You're able to train, and do workforce development with those application developers who are just going to be developing off that application layer. So you're cutting out the entire expense of really that expensive systems integration and bringing in and setting up your own infrastructure every time you create a new information system, because you have the infrastructure in place. And in addition to that, it doesn't tie you in. You're not proprietarily locked in with any one vendor now. Because if I'm a government agency and I developed my information system, on this open API, and I don't like API vendor A, I can go to API vendor B, and all it is just a reconfiguration of which API I'm calling. It's going to work because it's standards based in the exact same way, no matter who you go to. So again, we've removed the differentiation from the equation, and now all of the products are the same, except for those black box microservices, which are proprietary. But we really don't care what's in that, and that's where the vendor has the power to be able to develop out their microservice, just as long as it's mapped to the API layer. They have that. That's their technology, their proprietary part of this.
So Heather, instead of one big procurement process, they're always procuring tiny little things.
Well, instead of one large procurement process, what you would do, within our procurement rules within the state of Alaska, that's what I can speak to right now, is that you would have these API vendors would be available to answer to requests for proposals. And so it's just a change in the way we procure information systems. So we would go out then and we would say, okay, I'm putting out a request for an application, and we want to specify that this application is built on the OCAF ecosystem, or on a OCAF ecosystem existing somewhere, so that the government knows that they're not proprietarily locked in to any specific vendor. They have the advantage of moving around and being able to switch vendors whenever they want, and they don't have to go through the cost of setting up any infrastructure, doing systems integration, which, as you're right, is the main point of failure in in large scale developments. I can tell you, within the state of Alaska, we have two of our information systems. One is the statewide longitudinal data system that has a couple $1 million, I think, put into it, and it's not operable. And then we also have our health information exchange that's being reworked, that was federally funded as well. And I know that this is the case for for government agencies across the country. They really struggle with these large scale information systems and sustainability of them, and being able to set them up without without failure. We go through the failure cycle is high. Or the failure rate.
Okay. ¿Alguna otra pregunta, alguien?
I have a practical question. Let's suppose I'm thinking about providing some sort of application around this architecture. Is there any sandboxing in mind there where people can come in and try their ideas and with very low cost for trying behind that, or is that?
Certainly, and that's where the power of the business model comes in again as well. So if you're an API distributor and you really want to capture a certain audience, that's a great way to do it, because you might open up your API and allow someone to use it for sandbox development without any charge up front. Okay. And then once they've decided that they're happy with their application and they really want to go live with it, that's where you would transition them into a paying customer. So it definitely has that power for these. So the API developers aren't locked into one business model. They can build additional business models, have an entire business model portfolio off of this ecosystem.
Thanks. I am an academic, and our students don't have much money, nor do the academics, and but they have very good ideas.
Yes.
And I understand, for example, PayPal has a sandbox where people can try and sing things before getting into the business. Yes. Good.
Certainly.
Thank you.
And I think that we're going to see a lot of innovation off of an ecosystem like this as well, because you'll have businesses that want to develop software as service off of the ecosystem. And the beauty of it is that that the security and the interoperability for every system that's built off of this ecosystem, we get security and interoperability built in. And if we continue to upgrade that and maintain the standards, that means that we're continuing and we're getting input from the users in the ecosystem, from the vendors. That means that we continue to maintain those systems and keep them up to date. So it's more like a living, it's an ecosystem. It's an entity that continues to sustain itself.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Heather. It's been very nice, very useful, very informative. Y si nadie tiene más preguntas, yo les pediría que por favor abran la cámara y el micrófono para agradecerle a Heather la presentación que nos dio. Jeffrey, ¿cómo vas?
Thanks a lot.
Todos. Buenos días a todos.
Buenos días. And thank you very much, Heather, for
Gracias, Heather. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for having me. Maybe next time I will be in Costa Rica.
Maybe
Let's
we
hope
will
so.
go visit you in Alaska.
You should come up here to Alaska. We have amazing fishing and wonderful outdoor opportunities. It's just terrific here. I've got to tell just a really quick little story. So last year, my son and I went to Homer, Alaska, and we went up to do some fly fishing and decided that we were going to go out halibut fishing. And he's 15. And we went out by the Barren Islands, and he was jigging off of the front of the boat, and he was the first one to hook up. And he caught a 200-pound halibut that he reeled in by himself.
Wow.
It was an amazing experience. Amazing.
Wow.
200
So-
pounds.
Fed the family for quite a few days. Huh?
If you do have a chance to come up here and fish in Alaska, be sure that you reach out and let me know you're up here.
Thanks a lot, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Talk to you
Thanks,
later.
everybody.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Saludos, amigos.
Hasta luego. Tengan buen día. Muchas gracias.
Bye.
Gracias.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Muchas gracias.
Buen día.
Muchas gracias.